Alright, peoples. February 2019. Figure I'll take a walk around the fish room here. I want to go over some plants. If you're in this hobby long enough, you notice on the forums that things seem to come in waves. Every 6 months, a topic that has been revisited over the last 40 years will just keep coming up. One of the things is plants in general and what plants are good starter plants and do I need CO2 and yada yada yada. This is my 40-gallon breeder. It's a Tetra tank. It's Colombian red and blues and red eyes. I guess it would be considered moderately heavily planted. Up front here is dwarf sage. I try to keep it trimmed pretty low. It grows like mad. If you let it grow, I've seen it over 30 inches tall. Trim it back. It grows fast. It shoots out runners. This whole big chunk here that's bare, every week when I do water changes, I rip out a chunk somewhere. Well, you can always already see the runners that it's thrown out and shot up. That's now going to fill that hole back in. So if you buy this stuff, dwarf sage, buy a little piece. It'll grow in literally anything. I've got sand in the front of here. I've got, brain lapse. That's what I got. I got some timers. Eco-Complete. Eco-Complete in the back. Dwarf sage will grow anywhere. Buy a little piece, let it grow, rip out runners, propagate it throughout as many tanks as you want. This over here is an Amazon sword, this little guy. There's some more Amazon sword back there. This is a Nubius nana. Probably one of the toughest plants there is. The leaves are very thick and leathery, and it's one of the few plants that most fish won't tear up. Years ago, this was a tiny little rhizome. See the rhizome on that thing is about 6 inches long. But I've split it up so many times. There's a piece there, there's a piece there, there's pieces of several of my other tanks. Very hardy. If you can get it to grow, I mean, it grows pretty easy. No low light requirements, and you can split the rhizome and repropagate it as well. That's just shoved in between a couple rocks over there, and more dwarf sage in the corner. That's Ludwigia repens, maybe. I don't know. It doesn't do very well. I mean, it refuses to die. It keeps growing and spreading, but my flying fox are really lazy and don't really keep it cleaned off well. This is jungle val. Also, pretty much will grow anywhere under most any light conditions. And it will throw off plantlets, which on the leaf it'll shoot off a little spot of roots and start growing a new plant that you can pluck off and repropagate. This tank and my angelfish tank, which I'll show you next, are CO2 injected. It's a tank up there. Just 2 bubble counters split off a manifold, and it feeds both tanks. That's a 40-pound tank, I think, and it lasts me over a year running these 2 tanks. Yeah, so that's my 40-gallon Tetra tank. Come over here to my angelfish tank. That's pretty heavily planted. That's an Amazon sword. That's probably 16 inches tall right now. Weekly, I chop giant chunks out of it, and it just keeps coming back. That's a Nubius Bartai, maybe. And that back there is Wisteria. If you cannot keep a plant to save your life, buy a chunk of Wisteria. I cut, no joke, a foot off this thing every week. And I usually throw it in the tank of my Silver Dollar because he's literally a swimming lawnmower and just destroys everything. Java moss. I pull about a baseball-sized chunk of that off every week and throw it out. Also Java moss. This tank is also injected. You can see right there. So only these 2 tanks are CO2 injected, the rest are not. That's also Java moss. Some massive amount of pearling. Yeah, so all these are easy growing plants. They don't need to be injected, as we'll get to later, but these 2 tanks are. And between these 2 tanks, I throw out a garbage bag of plants every week. I keep trying to give it away to people, but nobody can seem to be bothered with it, so I just keep throwing it out every week. This is my Red Devil. He's probably about 9 inches right now. He's getting fat. Living large, that's what he's doing. These are fake plants because he's a giant asshole and will destroy everything in here. And by destroy, I mean he destroys the fake plants even. He rips them out of the fucking rock over there, rips leaves off this. This plant here used to be about twice the size. So weekly he just gets pissed off and starts ripping shit apart. I do have a hydroponics setup on top of this over here. That's pothos. That's water mint, which literally makes the entire room smell like a gum factory. Bamboo. There's 2 big ones there, 2 smaller ones there. I had celery in here for a while. Pretty much anything you stick in here will grow. This is just a little reservoir I built. It's got an overflow amongst the giant root ball that's in there. There's an overflow, keeps the water level right there. And it's just fed with a little pump. You can't see with the reflection. But in my overflow, there's just one of those little cheesy 3-watt tiny pumps that pumps it up here. And this tank can actually go over a month before I can even measure nitrates. And even then, they're usually sub 20. So, and I gotta hack this back because it's going to start taking over my entire house pretty soon. Yeah, so if you have asshole cichlids and want to do plants for nitrate control, set yourself up a little aquaponics setup. Flower horn, he's also in a 90. Fake plants that he regularly drags all over the tank because somehow he thinks that impresses me. He's showing off doing the fancy dance. You do have a little chunk of pothos just stuck up there. Not enough to really do anything, but his nitrates really aren't out of hand, ever. I do weekly water changes of minimally 50%. He's never had an issue. I've had him since he was about a ½ inch long. He's probably close to 10 inches right now, Mr. Fathead. Down here is 29. Bunch of marbled crayfish in here. There. They typically stay pretty well hidden during the day. These are just rosy minnows. I threw in here at one point out of my pond so I think my nephews were catching them as fry and wanted to stick them somewhere, so they've been in here. And these marbled crayfish just showed up in my pond one day. That little guy over there. There's probably 7 or 8 in here. They're continually buried up having little ones, but most of them get eaten, which is fine because how many marbled crayfish can you really have? But I was shutting my pond down one winter and I went to clean the skimmer out and pulled out a big bullfrog. And then I reached my hand down there and pulled out leaves. Well, in amongst the leaves was a marbled crayfish. Well, I brought him in and checked her out. They're all female, by the way, self-cloning. And in the 5 minutes or so I had her inside to check her out and see what the deal was, she got all warmed up and all active, and I didn't want to put her back outside and shock her, so I threw her in here. And then she's proceeded to have babies after babies after babies who had babies and then babies, and yeah. So now I've got just a tank loaded with everything from 4.5 inch adults to little guys to little ones that look like tiny little crickets. But most of the little ones I think the fish eat, or they eat, or somebody deals with them. But that tank, typically at any time there's 7 or 8 in there. Little guy back there, he's hiding. They're more active at night, but they are out during the day. Still no shrimp in here, but the snails are doing just fine. Shocking, huh? This is a 42 Beaufront, mainly with cribs. There's some white clouds in here and a couple Harlequin and Risboris, but it's mainly my Cribensis. And one main breeding pair, and she's had fry and fry and fry and more fry, and keep meaning to take a bunch of them over to my local pet store because they buy them from me, and I just haven't had time with the winter. This tank is not CO2 injected, and it's got really shitty lighting on it. But Dwarf Sage, Nubius Nana, Jungle Val, more Nubius, Amazon Sword. And while it doesn't go berserk, I've also got some water lettuce out of my pond up here as floaters. Next, there's some water lettuce, there's some water sprite or Salvina minima, and duckweed, which, you know, it's like herpes. If you have a fish tank long enough, you're going to wind up with duckweed. I didn't bring it home, somebody did. Came in on something. These tanks have been running for years, never has it seen duckweed. Within the last month, guess what? Duckweed everywhere. It's like cancer. And you can see all the different little cribs in there. So not CO2 injected, but the plants do just well. They just grow slower. 50,000 endlers. I really need to do something. Anybody want endlers? Come take a few hundred. There are way too many females in here. They're all pregnant 24/7. It's like red light Amsterdam district, bunch of hookers. Anyway. Dwarf Sage in there, a couple of my Amazon sprouts. That Amazon Sword about a month ago threw out a runner that I neglected to snip off right away. And between a water change or two, it sent a runner to the top of this 30-gallon tank, back to the bottom, and back up again. And on that runner were like 9 little Amazon Swords, which is what I threw out. Now, I just noticed the other day, it's doing it again. See this random thick stalk that's shooting over here? Well, by next week, that'll have a bunch of little plants on it again. It's tenacious. Autocinkless. All right. So, cribs, endlers, my circus tank. This has a silver dollar. Anyone who has ever had a silver dollar knows they will destroy anything that vaguely resembles a plant. The only thing he hasn't wrecked in here is, well, he's mowed off the Amazon Sword. That entire back used to be Dwarf Sage that he's just completely mowed down. This wisteria, this is a chunk I pull out of the angelfish tank. So when I goes in here, it's a big, thick, luscious bush. And within a week, he mows it down to this spindly little anemic stem. The only thing he doesn't have any interest in whatsoever is the jungle veil. There's a chunk there and a chunk there, and he has no interest in it whatsoever. But, so there's a silver dollar in here, there's some black tetras, the black skirt tetras, there's some flying fox, there's some mollies, there's a dinosaur gourami, there's an angelfish up in here, a big guy, there's a pictus cat down there, there's a Raphael cat up in the head, there's a peacock eel, Denison barbs. Most of the stuff in here has been rescue fish. And some loaches, Burmese border loaches, a couple of them in there. Everything gets along pretty fine. Most of the stuff that's rescued is old. Like I lost a black skirt tetra the other day. Now mind you, when I say lose a fish, being that there's 2 catfish in here, you never really ever find a corpse. I just noticed that one day there'll be less fish. So, between the Pictus cat and the Raphael cat, the odds of actually finding a corpse are slim to none. And if I do find it, it's like what's left of a head, because the rest of everything's been eaten. I did find a molly on the floor. Actually, one of my dogs found a molly on the floor the other day, but it was completely freeze-dried and hard and had been down there for weeks. And I really don't know how it would have gotten out unless it jumped out during a water change, because my tanks are all pretty well sealed up. But I digress. And the Africans. She, I'm pretty sure, is holding again because she hasn't been eating the last couple days. Which means in about 2 weeks I will strip her and then I will have more fry. I did lose 1 fish out of here last week. And it's the first fish I've lost in this tank in probably 18 months. I snowplow along with my other like 10 jobs. And when I'm out plowing, at times they don't get fed regularly. And when they don't get fed regularly and get hungry and angry and act like more assholes than they typically are. Anyway, I noticed one guy looked pretty beat up the other day. And that's, like I said, there's aggression. They're cichlids. You always have aggression. But no one ever shows signs. I got no damaged fins. Nobody's torn up. Nobody's acting weird. You know, they chase each other around occasionally, but nobody ever gets hurt. This guy had some fins missing and nip marks, and when I got him, he was at least 5 years old when I got him, so it may have just been his time. But he looked pretty beat up, and aside from looking ragged, he was eating and hanging out with everybody just fine, so I left him in there, and then he was belly up the other day. So that was the first fish in over 1.5 years I've lost out of this tank. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure she's holding. She's my giant hooker female. And the male is usually him. Then you wind up with these. Oh, this batch here is actually due to be taken in. I have a local fish store that buys them from me. So this batch is due to be taken. Actually, I might take them in tomorrow. So that's a batch. I think there's 54 in there. There's a batch over here. This is actually her last batch, which is why I suspected she's ready, because these guys are about 3/4 to an inch. It seems like that's about when she recycles up and kicks out another bunch. Yeah, so there you have it. The only plant that's in here is this piece of Anubias. And despite how tough it is, they have torn it apart pretty well. It hasn't died, but it's clearly a battle of attrition over here of who's gonna out-stubborn who. Synodontis. This is a 125. Yeah, other than that, nothing terribly exciting. Alright, well, I guess that's all for today. Later.